I think the best way to divide the practice time is what is shown here in this graph. And it's to divide your time in a very simple way. Take the total amount of time at your disposal and divide it by 3. Each of the 3 segments is then dedicated respectively to spending time alone on the instrument, practicing, playing with other people, or at least with play-along records, and listening to music. Come up with an example. If you now practice alone for 3 hours and listen to music for 2 hours a day, that means that you have 5 hours at your disposal. To apply this framework, we just simply have to take the full amount of minutes, which will be 300 minutes, divided by 3, which will give us 100 minutes per segment, and go from there. Do 100 minutes of each of these three things. Be aware that I am considering my practice time to include also the listening time. The listening time can be done basically anywhere, but it makes sense to do it in your room, in the comfort of your room where you can really concentrate. Why do I include listening time in practice? So because listening is practicing. Even if you are a natural talent, the chances that you'll invent from scratch your own musical genre and language in the next few years are very little. And even if you do, I know some people who are very advanced in doing this, it is very unlikely that people will want to listen to your stuff before you are dead. And you may be interested in some sort of feedback before that happens. So you have to get to know what the other people are playing. Up with this time allocation strategy, you have experienced any possible mistake and any possible strategy to improve the way I use my practice time. And some of the mistakes I've made are outlined in this slide. The common mistakes in time allocation. And let's go through them one by one. One of the biggest mistakes is to spend your entire life in the basement, where you create a relationship with your instruments that isolates you from the rest of what's happening, especially in a musical situation. You tend to play too much by yourself and not enough with other people, and you don't have a good way to measure your progress. You basically have no idea of if and of how much you are improving. To become a speed or independence addict, this is a back mechanism by which we tend to focus on some aspects of technique which we consider very important, and we end up considering them too important with respect to what how much they really matter. Unless how can speed be your main purpose if you're playing music? Independence, I can understand independence a little bit more, but again, how independent do you have to really be to express yourself? It depends on the kind of music. But it shouldn't take up 90% of your practice time. The problem, why is this an issue? Well, if we read the third bullet point, hang out with other drummers too much. That's another error we do a lot. We tend to speak to other drummers most of the time. We tend to measure our progress on the way other drummers perceive us. So this creates a sort of a community where basically that justifies the fact that sometimes the drummers are not considered musicians because they hang out and they talk about these chops, their abilities to do this and that, but sometimes things that have nothing to do with the music and the way they play with a band. Another error, these are all mistakes I've made myself, so that's why I'm outlining them. I'm talking out of experience. We tend to look forever for the ideal teacher that will finally boost our playing abilities, so we're never satisfied with what the guy we're currently dealing with is telling us, and we feel that we could be improving much faster. There is a speed, there is a pace at which we can improve, which is physiological, but we'll get into that maybe later. Another mistake we do is spend $1,000 on equipment, trying to compensate for the lack of our abilities. I've done that too. It just takes 2 minutes to listen to one very good drummer play a very bad instrument to understand that you're just wasting money and time shopping for stuff. Then another more refined, and more subtle way of losing or wasting your time is becoming addicted to drum charts. I had a period in when I was 15 or 16 years old, when I was transcribing everything I would hear. I was transcribing to learn, which is a good thing, but I was doing it too much. I remember transcribing Got a Match, Chick Corea's Got a Match. I'm probably the only guy in the world who has transcribed the full thing. If anyone of you is interested, just let me know. I'll send it to you. And I ended up being dependent on reading charts, and that can be dangerous, especially when you go into a studio and you play a concert. You become dependent on the chart too much. You tend not to develop your ability to memorize the song structure. So this is an important thing to consider, an important error to avoid. There is one last error, and it's highlighted in red here, because this is the most important and the most frequent error we make. And it's that of spending more than 20% of our time playing stuff we can already play comfortably. For some reason, we like the drum set, we enjoy playing and showing other people, showing even to ourselves that we're good at doing this groove, that passage, this solo. But every time you spend time playing something you can already play very well, you're just subtracting useful time to learning new things. And most error. Avoid this error. You will have much more room for improvement. You'll take much more advantage of the time you put into the drum set. You have to leave your ego outside the practice room and face all your limits and really focus on the stuff you cannot get done very well. That's where you have to improve. So we have examined the three segments based on which we should subdivide our practice time, and I'd like to delve deeper into the details pertaining to the first segment, which is practicing on the instrument by yourself. And this includes all the time you spend on an instrument. So on the practice bed, the time you spend on your hand technique, hand foot combinations, independence, groove, soloing, the time you spend experimenting with tuning or getting new sounds out of your instrument. Anything you do by yourself on a drum set with nothing but the support of a click, if any, or at most of a pre-recorded bass line or a percussion line. Instead of telling you now what you should practice, and we'll deal with that in future lessons, there's three topics I like to touch in the area of practicing on the instruments. The first one is related to how to set the correct tempo to practice an exercise. We're often taught to start slow and then increase your speed. Well, this is only partially correct. I think it is better to practice in a different way, which is working inside out from a speed you are initially comfortable with. Why is that? Because playing slow is just as hard as playing fast. So you should start at a tempo you are comfortable with and then proceed with the inside-out approach. Let's say you're learning something new and start at the most comfortable time to achieve the best compromise in sound and coordination. Only then, with that timing in mind, you will type it in your metronome and start practicing. Let's say you start at 140 BPM to the quarter note, because that is the speed at which this specific exercise feels physically manageable. Once it starts rolling at that speed, then stop and decrease the speed to 130. Then increase it to 150, then decrease it to 120, then increase to 160, and work this way outwards, slower and faster, until you reach speeds at which eventually it doesn't make any musical sense to progress further. You may do this in a single session or track your progress over time. It is very likely that very slow and very fast speeds will be impossible to achieve at first try without sounding inaccurate and sloppy. Why there are different challenges to playing slow and fast? Well, I'll touch very briefly on this. Playing slow leaves a lot of space. Our brain has a hard time when it has to leave space between notes. So from a mental point of view, it's much easier to play fast than slow. When the brain leaves space, it goes into panic and starts rushing. On the other hand, playing very fast really challenges your physical coordination. So usually your hand cannot keep up with what your brain is telling you to do correctly. That's why we should work the extremes, those two extreme outwards, to improve. The second topic I'd like to touch in the area of practicing on the instrument is to make an intelligent use of the metronome. There's a few things we have to consider when we use a metronome, which are very important. First, try to use a musical sound with a metronome. It might be a cowbell or a woodblock. Don't use those clicking sounds, nonsense clicking sound. Use a sound that might appear when you play with a band. Then you should try, another thing you should do when playing with the metronome is to vary the density of the time references. Do not necessarily always put the click on every quarter note, but I'll touch later on this topic because this requires a separate lesson. Another thing you should do is try to vary the density of time references within the same exercise. So let's say you could do things such as playing out of 4 bars, you play the first 2 with a click on each quarter note, and the second 2 bars with a click on each half or whole note. So that trains your brain to have fewer and fewer references and to develop a strong internal clock. Sometimes you can even use a program loop, something that feels good with a type of groove or exercise you're playing. So fire up some congas in GarageBand, do something like that, and use those instead of a metronome to simulate a real music scenario. The third topic I'd like to touch in the area of playing by yourself is the importance of recording yourself while practicing. Even while you practice alone, you should always record yourself. I mean, not all the time, but you should do it periodically to check your progress. You should do it with and without a click, and you might record your audio or even your video. Look at yourself, what you're doing. You might be doing something that's technically wrong. You feel it's correct, and you look at yourself, and it just looks ugly and wrong. It's a good chance to spot technical issues there. So if you record yourself with a click track, do it on a separate channel so that you can listen back to the way you sound with and without the click. That's pretty important. Because that's what's going to happen in the studio when you go and play on a song which has a click track. Another very important thing is you need the feedback of other people on the stuff you have recorded. So your teacher might be other drummers, sometimes other musicians, maybe a bass player. So do it on a single repeating groove, soloing specific exercises. Do it. Just record yourself, listen back, have somebody else listen and give you an opinion. So we go back to the other main topic we've covered so far. Practice alone on instrument. Now we deal with practice with other people or on play along tracks. Okay, in the area of practicing with other people, I have a few advice that will put you on the right track to get the maximum out of your time. The first advice is always record your gigs and practice sessions. Get yourself a device to do so comfortably, and something that you can start and stop with one click possibly. Audio quality matters, but it's only up to the point where you want to hear at least all the nuances of your playing. You don't have to make a record out of any recording you make or yourself. And you also don't have to listen back to everything or to back up any session of your musical life. But sometimes it's good just be able to answer a few questions. So you should keep your recordings for a while after the session, so that if you come up with questions such as, why wasn't that part as groovy as it should? What did we just play there? It was great. What did we do? Let's listen back to it. Or how can we make our whole playing feel as good as that specific part felt while we were rehearsing or playing? I think it's very important to be able to go back at what you just did and evaluate with the rest of your band how and things are going. Maybe somebody's speeding up, somebody's slowing down, somebody's too loud. It's always useful to listen back. The purpose is not finding who's guilty of not playing well. The purpose is to find the best way to correct the problems together. The second advice I'd like to give you in the area of playing with other people is to learn the song structures before you get to the gig, or obviously to the gig, okay, before you rehearse them, even before you rehearse them. If you can, try to get a hold of a chart of a recording, pre-existing recording, if any, so that you can study the structures by yourself. This is a very important advice, I think, and it has given me many troubles in the beginning. You have to be able to play the entire song in your head or parts of it without listening to other people, because you never know who might show up or not show up at rehearsal, for example. So if you rely too much on the part of a specific instrument, and that instrument is to get your points of reference, and then that instrument is missing, who's going to keep track of the structure of the song? So it is also your job. It's everybody's job. It's also your job to keep track of the structures, to be perfectly aware of where you are. Also, because sometimes if something is not coming out good, you have to repeat a specific part of the song, and you have to be able to know where to start and where to stop when the other musicians ask you to do that. So this is very important. The third advice I'd like to give you in this area is to be careful with play along tunes. This is a big area of that needs to be understood. I think that there are many types of music in which practicing with play along tracks is very useful. I don't think it is very useful to play with play along tracks, jazz tunes. I actually think it's much worse than playing with other people. I know it's always worse to play on a play along track compared to playing with other people, but especially in the area of jazz, I believe this can be really harmful, because but I'll touch on this in another lesson, because really it requires a lot of talk and of understanding. Jazz is made of tension. In jazz music, the beat is implied, but all the musicians may be sitting on the beat in different ways. Somebody may be playing on top of the beat, somebody may be playing on the back of the beat, whereas in other kinds of music, there's a more focus on the center of the beat. So in jazz music, you have this sort of elastic rope connecting all the musicians, and when you take one musician out, especially the drummer, which is the guy everybody refers to place their beats inside the song, you're sort of cutting this rope, or not making it elastic anymore. So when you when you put yourself in the shoes of the drummer that's been subtracted from the track, if you don't play exactly the way he plays, so if you don't try to emulate his style, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. You can try it. You might be lucky enough that the guy actually had your same approach to placing the beat on the pulse of the song. But it might not be like that. And you don't want to be playing like somebody else. You want to be playing like yourself. You want to find out if it works or not. That's a different issue. So I believe it's sometimes. I mean, using a play along track is is the only way to practice, especially with big bands. It's hard to find, like, sometimes even just an amateur big band to get 20 people together to rehearse. And I mean, practicing big band charts is something that needs to be done independently from the big band because it requires a real-time arrangement on the part of the drummer. So in that area, I suggest that you use play-along tracks a lot. I wouldn't use them. I would try not to use them a lot in the area of small combos and small groups playing in jazz. The third area we have to talk about is that of listening to music. It's important to spend time on focusing on how we listen to music, because the kind of listening we need to improve our playing is not the listening we do when we're in a subway or we're in a car. It's an active listening that requires concentration. Every time I listen to a new song that I find interesting, the first time I hear it, I try not to worry about the structure or what any specific instrument is doing. I just enjoy enjoyed it in full. But then, after I have listened to it 3 or 4 times, I try to take a more active approach. And since I am a drummer, I try to remove the drums mentally from the song and listen to what everybody else is doing. I like to try to step in his shoes. I try to listen to everything but the drums, and momentarily erasing what the drummer is doing from the record, I allow myself to ask questions such as, given what everybody else is doing, what made the drummer play this specific fill or rhythm in this specific context? Did the music call for it? Was he applying some patterns of his style? What else could he played instead? What else would I have played instead had I listened to the other instrument doing specifically that? This is very important because it allows you to develop an ability to be creative and to correctly adapt your style and interpret the correct approach to the music you're playing. After this first analysis, I suggest you listen a lot to interactions between drummers and soloists, if there's any solo going on, and look for the same things we were talking about before. Another thing that is very interesting is to look at this, not just take your microscope and listen to the specific sections or bar where something interesting happened, but look at the song from above. As I wrote here, 10,000 feet above, and listen to how the drummer handles the dynamic shifts in the whole song. If and when is playing, is he using the hi-hat, is he going to the right cymbal, how is he enabling this shift in the dynamics of the tune, because we have dynamic range that we have to control, and the song will call for a higher dynamic or for lower dynamic, and we have to control it and be ready to use the right tools at the right moments during a specific song. So it's very interesting to analyze what another drummer has done. So look at the whole, the song structure as a whole, and try to understand what the drummer did in the specific sections of the tune to reach that specific results. Another very useful thing is to take notes, so to write the form of the song you're listening to. Very shortly, you can just write, section A, 8 bars, section B, 16 bars, and so on. And maybe a little, 1 or 2 bars of the groove the guy is playing, just to remind you of of what he's doing. And again, this is very useful, especially if you have to play that song with somebody else. It will help you remember it, and this is a very good way to remember it. When you take note, you can also take note of specific licks that you hear, specific grooves, and it's important to try to transform them into exercises for your own practicing routine. So that when you go practice, instead of mathematically bashing any single possible combination of stickings on a drum set, you start from something musical that's already been played by someone else, and you apply variation to it. Something you've heard on a record, you can transform it, you can move it around a kit, you can experiment with different stickings, and you're starting from something that worked. Another useful thing is to sample specific sections of a tune. There's many softwares to do that. Maybe a part that represents a musical challenge to you and you want to reproduce, so you can loop that part, you can transcribe it, and you can bring it to the practice room and play along it, and try to emulate the original feeling. So with this last area, we have touched basically all the three areas that 33% you should cover when you spend a specific amount of time practicing. I strongly believe that this is the best way to structure your practice time. It has helped me to approach practice this way. I think this is the most efficient way to practice. But I mean, it's my opinion. If after reading you still feel that you don't practice your technique enough, that your speed and your coordination are not well developed, then I suggest you accept the following challenge. Go on with your routine for a few months, then show up at a local jam session. If your ass doesn't get kicked, I mean in musical terms, by someone who you judge much less technically prepared than you, then you're right and my approach is wrong. But be honest, in order to judge who's more musical, you have to look at the listeners' faces and understand how much more they enjoy a drummer who is well harmonized with the rest of the band. With respect to one who's doing a monologue of pure chops display. So it's very important. I believe that this is very important. This is the end of my first lessons. There will be more to come for those who are interested. Please contact me here on YouTube and let me know if there are a specific topic you would like me to touch on. I am not well versed in all the possible application of the drum set to music. I'll be honest. If something I don't know or I cannot give you an advice on, I'll be honest and I'll tell you right away because it doesn't make sense. Maybe I can help you ask those questions to somebody who's much more expert than me in those specific types of music or techniques. Thanks a lot for now. Bye-bye.